The following program paid for by Lifespan Wealth Management. Providing financial advice since 1993. It's time for Your Money with Sherry Goss, Randy Goss, and Jonathan Eisner. And now from the Macon studios of News Talk 940 WMAC, it's Your Money.
Good morning, Middle Georgia, and thanks for tuning in to Your Money, produced by Lifespan Wealth Management. As financial advisors, the main thing we do is provide retirement planning advice and manage our clients' investment accounts. So if you're looking for an investment advisor, call our office at 478-922-8100 to set up your complimentary consultation.
Lifespan Wealth Management has offices in Macon and Warner Robins for your convenience and has been serving Middle Georgia for over 30 years. You can learn more about our services by visiting our website at retirerelax.com. And while you're on our site, go to the special reports section where you'll find several reports that are available to you for free. You can also sign up to receive our digital feeds, which are short videos providing great information relevant to retirement, investing, and matters that affect your money.
We also offer seminars to the community at no cost. So if you're in need of a guest speaker for your church or civic organization, give us a call, and together we can decide what topics you would like us to present to your group. Again, our contact number is 478-922-8100. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be back.
Good morning.
It is.
Yeah, after last week's show, Sherry and I hopped on an airplane and took off on a long overdue vacation, and we went to Aruba. And what we learned when we got there, we always seemed to talk to the taxi cab drivers.
And they were so articulate and so smart.
They're very, very,
and they're making a
very
lot of
much
money.
So. Yep. Anyway, we talked about the education system in their country, and it was very fascinating. And we learned that their kids can go to college very inexpensively compared to America. And basically, our driver told us that his kids are going to college in Denmark because their tuition and rent is subsidized by the Aruba and the Denmark government. Now, that includes tuition, books, housing, and even the transportation on the bus system, which they can ride for free on the weekdays and at a significant discount on the weekends. And it turns out that Aruba has a very large medical school for veterinary medicine, and it's a lot less expensive than what we have here in the United States for the same degree.
So I have a client who has a son and a daughter. The daughter decided to go to medical school in the U.S., and the son decided to go to medical school in another country for a fraction of the price of what she is paying here.
Yeah.
So and it's the same education. And I think his was even faster. I think he got done a year earlier.
Do you remember what country?
No, I can't remember this person, who this is, or I would have looked at the
So
notes.
cool.
It's driving me crazy. Yep. But there's so many options for education. You need to really explore this, because how fascinating to go visit a great country and get an education cheap.
Yep.
And learn another culture.
Right.
I just love this.
And most importantly for us it was a very relaxing trip, and most importantly because we couldn't get on the internet and work. They kind of have their internet down there is shoddy at best. We had basically 3G, and we had to read a book and take a nap, which was good for us. And the food was excellent. We ate way too much probably. And on the way through customs, as we were departing, we met people that go there several times a year, and one family had 3 kids, and they go every quarter. The thing we like about Aruba, though, is the weather is constant, and it's always in the 80s, and it's always got a slight breeze, and therefore you have no flying insects that bite you.
Fabulous.
There's no gnats. If you're from Middle Georgia, you know what a gnat is.
Yes.
It was so relaxing. I'm still relaxed from it. Seriously.
Yep.
It's awesome.
We needed it. It was good. So I encourage you to take a trip to Aruba.
Excellent. So markets, both of the monthly inflation reports, the CPI and the PPI, came in hotter than expected this week. On Wednesday, the CPI rose by 0.5% month over month, which is the most it has risen since August of 2023. This marked the 4th straight month increase in the CPI going back to September. On Thursday, the PPI rose by 0.4% month over month, which was higher than the 0.3 expected. The latest economic data signals a moderating but still resilient economy with slowing job growth and declining job openings, while manufacturing expanded for the first time in over 2 years. The service sector is losing momentum, and rising inflation expectations, particularly with higher wage growth, suggest the Federal Reserve is likely to keep rates steady in the near term. Markets may experience volatility due to economic uncertainty, potential tariff impacts, and the Fed's data-dependent approach, with rate cuts unlikely until later in 2025 unless inflation cools meaningfully. We had a call this week with the company that our home office has selected for stock market guidance. And here are some of the points that they made, which is interesting. They started by talking about the data centers that are being built across the country and the energy they will require to operate and make computer chips, which we have talked about before. In their words, significant technology innovations, dramatic policy reforms, shifting geological dynamics, and accelerating climate goals are all driving change across an energy complex, simultaneously coming to terms with a quantum leap in power demand. Quote. They reported strong earnings growth in the U.S. They talked about tariffs and explained there are 3 types of tariffs: tariffs used for negotiation, reciprocal tariffs with us, and blanket tariffs to increase revenue and fund government spending and lower taxes, which they think is unlikely to happen. They see the overall impact of tariffs as benign and more about negotiation. Inflation, they expect it to go down. We need service and rent deflation to get there. Wealthy boomers are part of the problem due to their spending, and we saw this on our trip to Aruba last week. Half the people at the hotel were retired. It was insane the money they were spending on food and drinks and just doing stuff because they have the money.
That's right.
And so it's an outlier that we have so many retirees with money spending. So interesting.
Good for them. Okay, Ford Motor Company announced its fourth quarter and full year earnings for 2024, which surpassed Wall Street expectations. However, the automaker also reported substantial losses. This is no surprise. We talk about this a lot in the electronic vehicle and software division, known as Model E. The company lost $5.1 billion in this segment in 2024, which was a significant increase from the $4.7 billion they lost in 2023. Furthermore, Ford predicts that losses will continue to mount, potentially reaching $5.5 billion this year.
I don't see how, excuse me, I don't see how they can keep losing money like this. And
Me neither.
yeah. And in local news, Georgians could get a chance in November to vote on authorizing sports gambling after senators on Tuesday approved a state constitutional amendment. Central Georgia residents say that they are ready for legal wagering as state senators proposed a 20% tax on gambling addiction funding. The resolution would establish a gaming commission to oversee the operations. The resolution marks Georgia's 7th consecutive year the legislative body has considered sports betting legislation. However, supporters believe this attempt has stronger momentum, particularly with neighboring states, Tennessee and North Carolina, already offering legal sports betting. If approved by 2/3 of both legislative chambers, the measure would appear in Georgia ballots on November of 2026. However, Georgia Kemp has previously said as long as he is governor, he would veto any effort to legalize gambling.
So I really find this interesting, and that people in this country, in this state, go to neighboring states to gamble, and they go there and spend piles and piles of money. Your mom is one of these,
Yep.
And so it's like, why wouldn't we have this here? If you don't like it, I get it, but people are spending their money out of the state.
I remember back, when we were still living up in Jonesboro, and I was selling real estate. The people in the real estate office, this is back before Georgia had lottery and Alabama did. And we had a young lady in the office. She wasn't young. She was older, and she had a Corvette. And every week she would get in the Corvette and collect money from everybody, and she would race to Alabama and buy a whole bunch of lottery tickets and race back. That was her excitement for the week.
I had clients that drove to Florida to do the same thing.
Really?
Yeah.
So they were doing it then, and they're still doing it now. So they're sending the money across state lines.
I don't get it. Anyways, Fed Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said on Tuesday that the growing crisis in the insurance industry may make it hard to get a mortgage in parts of the country in the coming decades. He said that if you fast forward 10 or 15 years, there are going to be regions of the country where you can't get a mortgage, noting that banks and insurance companies have been pulling out of coastal and fire-prone areas they deem too high risk. Insurers have been canceling policies across the country as climate change intensifies natural disasters, saddling them with multi-billion-dollar losses. Because mortgage lenders typically require homeowners insurance as a condition of making a loan, prospective buyers with few alternatives are increasingly purchasing coverage from state-designed insurers of last resort, which can have higher premiums and skimpier coverage than the traditional alternatives. And I will just add a note. I have a client who has a vacation home in Florida. She can't afford the insurance, so the house is not insured at all, because it was like $25,000 a year to insure the house. So she's like, if it gets wiped out, it gets wiped out.
So risky.
Crazy.
It is. On to another hot topic, deportation. According to the Associated Press, 2 Venezuelan planes returned home Monday with about 190 Venezuelans deported from the United States, signaling a possible softening in the relationship between our two countries and a diplomatic victory for Donald Trump in his efforts to get more countries to take their people back. Deportation flights from the U.S. to Venezuela have been halted for years, except for a brief period in October of 23. Venezuelans began showing up at the U.S. border with Mexico in large numbers in 2021 and are currently one of the largest nationalities entering illegally, making Venezuela's refusal to take them back a major challenge for the U.S. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said in a recent interview that this is the world we want, a world of peace, understanding, dialogue, and cooperation.
Interesting.
Isn't this a major shift in communications between our two countries?
Very much.
All right. There's also been a lot of talk on tariffs. News about U.S. tariffs on goods from Canada, Mexico, and China, and the announcement of retaliatory tariffs prompted markets to sell off in an immediate response. And before the day came to a close, we learned that tariffs on Canada and Mexico would be delayed. And while these events continue to unfold, I think it's important that we take a look back at the market response to tariffs in the first Trump administration. So looking back, what did the 2018 and 2019 trade war mean for the U.S. economy? In 2018 and 2019, the U.S. and China had a significant impact on the U.S. Economy. It caused disruptions, price increases, and which squeezed some businesses' profit margins and elevated uncertainty, which led to stalled U.S. business investment and hiring.
The Federal Reserve maintains their historic Beige Book, and here are some observations from that period. Manufacturers expressed concern about tariffs, and many reported higher prices and supply disruptions that they attributed to the new trade policies. There were great uncertainty owing to tariffs and the threat of tariffs. Reports of tariff-induced cost increases spread more broadly from manufacturers and contractors to retailers and restaurants. Manufacturers reported that tariffs led to higher costs of raw materials and lower profit margins. Trade-related uncertainty remained significant, causing some companies to decrease production levels and staff headcounts. Trade policy uncertainty led to reduced capital expenditures, and trade-related uncertainty remained significant, with some companies decreasing production levels and staff headcounts due to lower profitability.
Yep. The 2018-2019 tariff war also had a significant impact on the stock market, taking them on a roller coaster ride. It led to higher volatility as ups and downs were dictated by news flows on trade talks and the removal of tariffs and application of more tariffs. In general, there was a flight to perceived, quote, safe haven assets globally. When talks broke down and or additional tariffs were applied, U.S. stocks sold off. When talks resumed, U.S. stocks rose. Once the Phase 1 trade deal was announced in October of 2019, U.S. stocks rose significantly. The S&P 500 fell 4.38% in 2018, but it gained 31.5% in 2019. Chinese stocks also experienced volatility and sell-offs during the trade war, but experienced a recovery as the tariff war subsided. For 2018, the MSCI China A Index fell 30.16%, but for 2019, it rose 36.4%. In other words, tariffs caused short-term headwinds. Once markets grew accustomed to them and a resolution was reached, as the Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China was announced, volatility eased and financial markets reaccelerated.
So, if history repeats itself, what does this mean today for today's trade tariff wars? We have to remember that protectionist measures have tended to result in less optimistic economic growth globally in the near term, but have not necessarily served as a long-term hurdle for the stock market. Nonetheless, a period of trade policy uncertainty could potentially weigh on the markets as it did in 2018 and 19 until greater clarity emerges. We could see a similar scenario unfold this time as we did in the first Trump administration. Lots of drama, but no real long-term impact. We are remaining cautiously optimistic that this will be the case. So why have markets reacted so negatively knowing our recent history? I think it's because many assume that the Trump administration would be focused on keeping stocks buoyant and would use tariffs as a threat rather than actually implementing them. As markets will continue to fluctuate as more tariffs are applied and then things will smooth out again, it's going to be kind of a rinse and repeat scenario.
I like that. So you might be wondering what that will mean for inflation and GDP. During our recent analyst call, this was a topic of conversation. They feel that in the near term, tariffs will cause prices to rise, but believe these increases tend to quickly dissipate as tariffs are removed, so they don't result in sustained inflation. However, tariffs can suppress demand. If prices rise, certain price increases could cause demand to slow. So we would hope that tariffs do not stick around for extended periods of time. And then there are the retaliatory tariffs, which could magnify and globalize the effects, which means that the global economy could end up with less growth and higher inflation as a whole. Keep in mind that the U.S. may have less to lose than any one trading partner, but if the war is being fought against a range of partners, the cumulative damage on the U.S. economy could be greater than on any single trading partner.
There are already signs that policy uncertainty is having a negative impact on U.S. consumer sentiment, as evidenced by the significant decline in consumer confidence in the Conference Board's survey just released this past week. Also, U.S. gross domestic product data released last week showed that fixed investment spending was down in the fourth quarter, which could very well be due to business uncertainty about tariffs and other policies. In short, tariffs tend to lead to less optimal outcomes but are unlikely to derail the current business cycle. But the risk grows as more tariffs are applied and the longer they are in place. So, while both U.S. Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index surveys released Monday, that's a mouthful,
Right.
those both showed a more optimistic outlook for the sector than we've seen in a while. That could easily change as the application of tariffs have entered the picture. We'll want to keep an eye on signs of any kind of deterioration, sentiment, or spending plans resulting from these tariffs.
So, on a more positive note, the earnings season has been going well so far for the S&P 500 stocks overall. Of the companies that have reported, 77% of the earnings have come in above estimates. The Bank of Canada and the European Central Bank cut rates and indicated a lot of uncertainty about the future, largely fueled by the potential for U.S. tariffs. Our Federal Reserve is in no rush to cut the rates, and it made it very clear this past week that he wants to see the impacts of the tariffs on the economy before he starts to cut. And I, for one, don't blame him. And it may be the second or third quarter before we see a rate cut in the United States. And looking ahead, the coming weeks will no doubt be very busy as we follow the ever-evolving trade wars. There will likely be a heightened sensitivity to any inflation-related data, given tariffs already have markets nervous. So don't be surprised to see wild swings in the stock market.
Right.
Yep.
And
Don't
look
freak out.
And don't look at your accounts.
Yeah, right. Good advice. With tariffs coming, here is one way, though, that consumers plan to cushion the financial blow. With tariffs ramping up, the prices on some everyday items will rise as well, not surprising there, which is weighing heavily on American consumers. A recent consumer survey found that 86% of Americans expect price hikes from higher tariffs, and many already have a strategy to cushion the blow. Faced with higher costs, many people plan to change their shopping habits by bid on equipment. So, if you need industrial equipment, this is a great place to shop. Among the top changes respondents plan to adopt, the majority say they will shop at thrift or secondhand stores. Other saving strategies include comparison shopping or buying fewer imported goods. A separate report by ThreadUp, an online consignment and thrift store, reflects a similar finding, which is that more than half, 55% to be exact, of surveyed consumers say if the economy doesn't improve, they'll spend a higher share of their apparel budget on secondhand items.
And I will tell you that we have a really good resource in Macon, and I'm trying to remember what it's called. The where you donate clothes.
Where?
No, the huge one. It's like the largest one in the
The
United
Goodwill?
States. The Goodwill in Macon
Yeah.
is the largest Goodwill in the United States, and it is massive as far as clothing goes. It is such a deal. I mean, you can find new pants because people just donate stuff instead of taking stuff back. They donate stuff that doesn't fit, but the tag's still on it.
Yep, sure
so
do.
yeah, where downtown in Macon is also a really good deal.
I've known people to buy, I'm not kidding, tuxedos from Goodwill.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, what a
So,
deal!
I mean, think about it,
Instead of renting
$25 on a tux or something
Mhm.
like that. Over the next 5 years, the re-commerce market is projected to grow 55% by 2029, reaching $291 and some change billion dollars and outpacing the overall retail market. This is according to a 2024 re-commerce report by OfferUp, which is an online marketplace for buying and selling new and used items.
So what do you need to know before you shop secondhand? Consumer savings expert Andrea Warrock recommends shopping local listings like Facebook Marketplace and Nextdoor to find deals on large household items like sporting goods, furniture, bikes, and even light fixtures like chandeliers, which are often imported and tend to cost a lot to ship.
So our daughter in Colorado, when she was redecorating her house, she went on that Facebook Marketplace. She got furniture and rugs and all sorts of stuff for cheap.
And a lot of times for free.
Yeah,
People just wanted it
just
gone.
wanted to get rid of it.
Yep. She also says to avoid large household appliances which would not function properly if you're buying directly from another person. And your best bet with large and small appliances is to look for certified refurbished models from reputable retailers like Amazon Renewed, or open box items or floor models from, say, Home Depot or other big box stores. And when it comes to clothing, there's no shortage of stores and sites for secondhand apparel and accessories, so just shop around.
I've never heard of refurbished models of appliances.
Oh, yeah,
I've never-
Amazon has them all the time. And
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we should have probably done that. Okay, so Governor Kemp tackles tort reform as promised. Governor Kemp unveiled his tort reform package about a week ago that he says should level the playing field in our courtrooms, ban hostile foreign powers from taking advantage of consumers in legal proceedings, and aims to stabilize insurance costs for businesses and consumers with the ultimate goal of increasing transparency and fairness, all in an effort to ensure that Georgia continues to be the best place to live, work, and raise a family. During Governor Kemp's State of the State address, he discussed how the state's legal environment is draining family bank accounts and hurting job creators of all sizes in nearly every industry. For an unprecedented 11 consecutive years, Georgia has been named the #1 place to do business, and the governor wants that streak to continue. And one way to do this is by working together to ensure that we put families and consumers first by tackling the hidden costs we all pay thanks to Georgia's current tort laws, which are driving up costs and threatening our long-term future. These much-needed reforms strike the right balance by protecting every Georgian's constitutional right to civil justice, while also bringing Georgia more in line with the legal environments of our neighboring states that we compete with for jobs and investments.
Yep, here are the specific policy areas addressed by the legislation. First, reevaluating the standard for negligent security liability, which is premises liability. It ensures businesses should only be liable for what they directly control. If signed into law, the legislation would hold property owners liable for failures to keep their property safe for their customers and the public, but protect establishments for simply opening their doors and employing hardworking Georgians in the communities and neighborhoods that need them. Second, truthful calculation of medical damages in personal injury cases, also called phantom damages. This requires the plaintiff to only seek damages in the amount actually paid or that will be paid in the future for a medical bill, rather than the inflated amount that is currently introduced in evidence. Ensuring Georgians who are successful in their litigation are made whole, have their costs covered, while protecting consumers from inflated costs being passed on to them.
Next, eliminating the ability to arbitrarily anchor pain and suffering damages to a jury. It's called anchoring. It prohibits the use of anchoring tactics by attorneys in closing arguments so the jury can use their own discretion rather than an artificial benchmark like the cost of fighter jets or the number of miles a truck drove or the salary of a professional athlete, all which are real examples from cases. This bill does not place any limits on the jury's discretion. In fact, the governor's legislation protects the jury's decision making from irrelevant and improper arguments from the counsel, empowering the jury to decide an award amount on their own. And then there's bifurcated trials. Permits a party in a case to move for bifurcation of a trial so that the liability must be established before the jury hears evidence detailing the extent of the plaintiff's damages. This clarifies an important procedure in the courtroom and gives both sides of the case the same opportunity to have their arguments heard.
So next, allow a jury to know whether the plaintiff wore their seatbelt. Admissible seatbelt evidence is what this is called.
I can't believe this wasn't already a law.
Right. Remove the current exclusion from the evidence code that prevents the defendant from showing evidence the plaintiff was not wearing his or her seatbelt in an auto accident. Allowing admission of seatbelt evidence at trial may be used by the defense to mitigate damages, particularly where the plaintiff's failure to use this essential safety feature results in significantly worse injuries. So we have a neighbor who has a relative who actually got into a vehicle with a person who was drunk driving, and they neither of them put their seatbelt on. The drunk driver went off the road. The car rolled over, landed on its top, and crushed her neck. And she was extremely
messed up.
Extremely
damaged.
messed up. I went to see her in the hospital, and she had one of those cage things on her head. It was like
She wore it for a year.
yeah. So she got like
What about the
800
passenger?
Oh, she was the passenger,
She was the passenger.
and the driver was okay too.
Wow.
But she
He
got
went
like
to jail for a
800,000.
year.
She made like $800,000.
That's the claim that she
Wow.
got, the fact that she was injured in this wreck. and it makes no sense. So
No.
they got an attorney. She made $800,000. She chose to get into a car with a drunk driver and not wear a seatbelt.
Right.
I don't understand why this is still happening.
This would put a stop to that.
Anyways, sorry, I got off on a tangent there. Okay, next one, eliminate double recovery of attorney's fees, closes an important loophole that allowed plaintiffs' counsel to recover their fees twice for the same lawsuit. Courts will remain able to award attorney fees, but only once. What is wrong with all of this?
I know. Next, eliminate plaintiff dismissal during trial. Amends the timeline for voluntary dismissals, putting an end to the practice of plaintiffs dismissing a case and refilling in or cherry picking a more favorable jurisdiction to them after the defense has already racked up the cost of preparing and beginning the trial. Next, the motion to dismiss timing changes. Changes the Civil Practice Act to allow a defendant to file a motion to dismiss in lieu of an answer, cutting down unnecessary discovery expenses while a motion to dismiss is pending.
All right. And the last part of this is reforming and bringing transparency to third-party litigation funding. First, there's three parts to this. First, the legislation bans hostile foreign adversaries from using our litigation climate to undermine our vital security and economic interests, which is designed to protect Georgia businesses and consumers from foreign actors who may fund litigation to obtain trade secrets or advance their own political interests against the interests of the citizens of the state. Second, the legislation protects consumers from predatory lenders who want to take advantage of litigants in vulnerable situations by prohibiting litigation funders from having any input into the litigation strategy or from taking the plaintiff's whole recovery and making sure plaintiffs are aware of their rights. And lastly, increasing transparency for all parties, the courts, opposing litigants, and the plaintiffs themselves.
So above all, Governor Kemp's tort reform package puts families and consumers first by tackling the hidden costs we all pay. We are all paying for this.
That's right.
To Georgia's current tort laws. I love this.
I know it was a lot, but we thought you just needed to hear it. So
You've been listening to Your Money, produced by Lifespan Wealth Management with your hosts, Sherry Goss, Randy Goss, and me, Jonathan Eisner. If you'd like to contribute to the show, you can email Randy at rfmoney.com with a question or topic that you'd like us to cover in a future broadcast. Our number is 478-922-8100. We have offices in Macon and Warner Robins for your convenience.
And you can find out more about us by visiting our website, retirerelax.com. Lifespan Wealth Management has been serving the Middle Georgia area for over 30 years, helping people like you achieve their investment and retirement goals. And if you're in need of a financial advisor, please contact our office at 478-922-8100.
We also offer seminars to the community at no cost. So if you are in need of a guest speaker for your church or civic organization, give us a call and together we can decide what topics you would like us to present to your group.
Again, our contact number is 478-922-8100. Now back to the show.
Good deal. So next up, the cost of procrastination. Here's an example of procrastination that we can all relate to. Say you're driving along when a police cruiser pulls up behind you with its lights flashing. You pull over, the officer gets out, and your heart drops. The officer asks if you are aware that the registration on your car has expired. You've experienced one of the costs of procrastination. Procrastination is avoiding a task that needs to be done, postponed until tomorrow, what can be done today. Procrastinators can sabotage themselves. They often put obstacles in their own path. They may choose paths that hurt their performance. And I have this in some of my clients, very few, but they will not get a budget. They will not look at their spending. They will not track anything because they just don't feel like it.
We talk to people all the time that do this, and we encourage them to come see us. And some of them we hear from, but some of them we don't, and they just kind of linger in that procrastination state. You know, Mark Twain famously quipped, "Never put off until tomorrow what you can put off until the day after tomorrow." But in all seriousness, there are times that procrastination can be detrimental, both in our personal and professional lives. The problems caused by procrastination in the business world have led to sizable industries in books, articles, workshops, videos, and other products created to deal with this issue. There's a number of theories about why people procrastinate, but whatever the psychology behind it is, procrastination may just be costing you money.
Absolutely.
Yep, and it's particularly true when we're talking about investments and financial decisions, when those are put off for too long. Here's a very simple illustration of how putting off investing might put off potential returns for you. Let's look at a case of Cindy and Charlie, we'll call them. Each invest $100,000. Charlie immediately begins depositing $10,000 a year into an account that earns 6% rate of return. Then, after those 10 years, he stops making deposits. Cindy waits 10 years before she gets started. Then she starts to invest $10,000 a year for 10 years into an account that also earns a 6% rate of return. Cindy and Charlie have both invested the same $100,000. However, Charlie's balance is higher at the end of 20 years because his account has more time for the investment returns to compound. I think this is a pretty basic and common knowledge about investing. But to emphasize it more in a real life way, let's say that Cindy waits 10 years and then instead of depositing $10,000 a year for the next 10 years, she deposits her entire $100,000 all at once in that 11th year. Charlie's still going to come out ahead in 20 years because his $100,000 had a head start and growth on Cindy's money.
Yeah, of course, this is hypothetical. Is a hypothetical example of a mathematical compounding. It's used for comparison purposes only. It's not intended to represent the past or the future performance of any investment, and taxes and investment costs were not considered in this example. So if you've been meaning to get around to addressing some part of your financial future, maybe it's time to develop a strategy. Don't let procrastination keep you from pursuing your financial goals. The point here is this: we at Lifespan Wealth Management are in the business to help you achieve your financial and retirement goals. So if you need that assistance to get started and stop procrastinating, then I encourage you to give us a call. We have programs designed for all levels of investors, whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned investor. Our number is 478-922-8100, and the consultation is free.
And we're not going to pressure sell you on anything.
Yeah, as we like to joke around and say, we don't chase you across the parking lot.
Right.
I guess I should point out from our example, just because you never know, we don't have crystal balls, but if in the unlikely event that that the first person's money over that first 10-year span was actually less in 10 years than they started out with, in that situation, Cindy would have actually won by putting her $100,000 in the 11th year. But that's unlikely.
It's unlikely.
Never in a 10-year span in the history since they've been tracking these things has the market had a negative return over a 10-year span. So I guess I should at least asterisk that little example. Let's discuss will and some of the best online will makers. We talk about wills all the time. They're very
I have
important.
clients that will not get it done.
Procrastinator.
They will not
Exactly.
get it done. They don't think they're going to die. We're all going to die, people.
100% mortality rate.
Well, you just ruined my day. All right, here's 6 free or cheap options for getting a will done. A will or last will and testament is a legal document that provides instructions for what to do with somebody's assets after they pass away. I think everybody knows that, but just to refresh on that, there's a lot of great options online that are free or relatively inexpensive that many people can use to make a will. But an online will is not for everyone. So this information will cover some of the best free or at least inexpensive online products and covers common myths about wills. 6 companies with will making services that meet the criteria above. And if you want this list, you can email me at jonathan@rfmoney.com and I will send it to you. Number 1, Fabric by Gerber Life. It's a great price tag. Free. Fabric by Gerber Life specializes in life insurance policies which are underwritten by Western and Southern Life Assurance Company. And while they're well known for their association with Gerber, you don't need one of their life insurance policies to use their will-making services. A Fabric will maker is available to anyone with no gimmicks, no need to sign up for a service, no required software or app downloads to start. All you need to do is click the Create a Free Will button on the Fabric Digital Wills page. You can click on the Fabric by Gerber Life Will Maker questionnaire first to see if a will is right for you. The quiz shows 8 statements. You select all the statements that apply and then start your will.
I've got to start printing this out and handing it to clients that will not get this done. I'm
It's
so
a great
aggravated with
resource.
It
this.
seems pretty straightforward.
Right.
The second one here is free will. I just like the name of this one. Who doesn't want free will, right?
Right.
It is also free. If charitable giving is part of your estate planning, consider using free will. Free Will is a public benefit corporation that works with more than 1,400 nonprofit organizations that pays fees so people who need wills don't have to. In return, it is easy for anyone making a will to choose to leave a gift to a cause that they care about. Free Will reports that more than 937,000 wills have been created, and their business model has resulted in more than $9 billion committed to
that's awesome.
nonprofit organizations.
Fantastic.
It's fantastic.
Number 3 is LegalZoom. Price starts at $99, and we've actually helped somebody, a friend of ours, who needed a will. We actually downloaded this and helped him get this done. LegalZoom offers several options for completing a will online, but none of them are free. Their basic last will starts at $99, but this is a stripped down product because it doesn't come with access to a lawyer, which is typically one of LegalZoom's selling points. Once you get past the $99 level, everything is a la carte. So be sure you know what you're getting into. You may be just as well off hiring someone local with a referral.
Number 4, Quicken Will Maker. Price starts at $109, and it caps out at around $219. If you want access to a robust suite of legal forms, Quicken Will Maker and Trust might be for you. This company works on an annual subscription model with a few different options. For $109, you can get the starter membership, which gives you access to forms for wills, healthcare directives, and final arrangements. For $219, you get their all access membership, which includes everything found in the Plus and Starter memberships. You'll also get access to additional smaller forms like temporary guardianship, authorization, and limited power of attorney. You can also use their digital storage vault through EverPlans. And remember that each of the memberships is based on an annual subscription. If you choose not to renew your subscription, you can still access your documents forever, but you won't be able to make any changes through Quicken Will Maker if you do that.
All right, number 5 is Ethos. The price starts at $149. Ethos is a life insurance company that takes pride in its hassle-free online application process for its customers. They also make it extremely easy for you to create a will online. You can create a basic will with Ethos for $149, but be aware that as a life insurance company, they will take this as an opportunity to try to upsell their life insurance products to you.
Absolutely, they will. Number 6, Trust and Will. Price starts $199. That's $199, sorry. Trust and Will is another relatively cheap option for you to create your will online. Pricing starts, and I already said that, it's repeating itself, $299 for couples. But after your initial fee, you might have to pay an annual rate to maintain your benefits. The company says that the first 30 days of membership is included with their will-based estate plan, and it costs $19 for each year after that. If you choose Trust and Will, you'll have access to a few extra documents other than the last will and testament. You'll get access to the HIPAA or authorization form, which lets you authorize someone to get your protected health information if you choose, and you'll get access to their living will and power of attorney documents. The company also offers a 30-day satisfaction guarantee, so if you're not happy with their documents or the functionality, you can request a refund.
As we're reading through these, I'm hearing that a lot of these are monthly subscription-based services, and I'm thinking,
Why?
Why? I'm thinking to myself, you get a will done, that's something you need to look at every year or two and make sure it's current, but what in the world do you need monthly subscriptions for? And then I got to thinking, you guys know I had to replace parts from a water heater this week.
Right.
And so the gentleman comes out, from the plumber, and he shows me this brochure, and he says, hey, here's what we're offering right now. It's $12 a month. And it's some sort of monthly membership to the plumbing company.
What?
Where I didn't even entertain it. Like, it has all these things that you can get if you pay the $12 a month, and I didn't even look at them.
But if it keeps you from having to pay the service charge,
it does. That was one of the things.
If my company offered that, I would be way ahead this year.
If you're plumbing company, sure.
Yeah.
No, I get that. It's silly to me. Like, we talk about tipping culture has gotten way out of control. You tip.
Everybody's trying to get in on the they're trying to get on the subscription game.
Recurring revenue.
Yeah.
But sometimes it just seems silly.
It does.
On a will website.
I agree with you. I think that if you're going to get it done one time, review it, and then go back and buy it again if you need it.
Right.
Right, if you need to update it.
So,
all right, so how do you make your will legally binding? Once you've completed an online will, you'll most likely need to take a few more steps to finalize everything. That's because electronic wills are not recognized as legally binding in most states. There are 5 steps you need to take to validate a will that's made online. These steps include, number 1, find 2 disinterested witnesses or people who are not beneficiaries, like coworkers, to be present as you sign a printed copy of your will. These witnesses are meant to verify that you're of sound mind and no one is pressuring you or influencing your actions. Number 2, sign your will and have your witnesses sign your will in accordance with your state laws. For example, some states require you to sign each separate page of your will. Number 3, consider including an affidavit of attesting witnesses. While recommended, this step is not necessary, but if you do this, you'll need this to have this process notarized. Number 4, store your will in a safe place. Number 5, contact your executor and at least one other party and tell them where your will is stored.
Please.
Right. That's a very important part of this thing.
It's under my bed.
Right. With all my cash. It is sad to report, but according to caring.com, only 32% of Americans have a will. Does that number surprise you, Sherry?
No, I
Me
can't
neither.
get people to get it done.
Me neither.
I beg them.
That's the lowest rate since 2020. The study found that 40% of adults without a will say it's because they don't have enough assets to need one. If you only have a few assets or no children, then you might be fine without a will. But in any other situation, you probably need one.
If you have a house,
Yep. If you own pretty much anything. So what are the common misconceptions that people have that prevent them from starting to make a will?
so myth number 1, I don't need a will. Maybe you don't have much in the way of assets, so you think you don't need a will. But if you have children or are married, there are benefits to having a will in place. Let's start with why you need a will if you have kids. It's difficult to think about, but consider this. If something were to happen to you, the state would decide who raises your kids if you do not have a will in place. Of course, if you share custody or you're married, then the other living parent would typically get custody. But if you're the sole custodian or something happens to both parents, then having a will allows you to name personal and financial guardians. What if you're married but don't have any kids? Well, without a will, the state decides how to allocate your money or any other assets if something were to happen to you.
What can go wrong there?
Right. How they do this depends on the state, but it can be time consuming, involving freezing your assets and requiring part of your estate to go toward paying probate fees. And if you have a partner but you're not married, even if you live together, your partner might not be considered to inherit any part of your estate at all, despite what you may have wanted.
Myth number 2, my spouse will automatically get everything I have. A common misconception amongst married people is that without a will, the surviving spouse will automatically get everything the other person leaves behind. Unfortunately, this is not always that simple. What your spouse gets depends on what state you live in and the type of assets you leave behind. Intestate is the term used to describe someone who dies without a will. And every state has intestate succession laws in place to determine how your property gets passed on. According to NOLO, here's the simplified version of how intestacy works in Georgia. In Georgia, if you are married and you die without a will, what your spouse gets depends on whether or not you have a living descendants, children, grandchildren, or great-grandchildren. If you don't, then your spouse inherits all your intestate property. If you do, they and your spouse will share your intestate property equally, except your spouse's share cannot be less than 1/3. Again, this is different in every state.
So I had a case of this when I first started working here, and I was doing a seminar for Robbins Financial Credit Union. And there were about 25 people there, and I'm talking about this stuff. And this woman stood up and she said, my husband would not make a will, and I kept nagging and nagging at him to make a will because he has 2 children that are not mine. He has me, wife, and 2 kids with another woman. So I kept telling him to get this done, and he finally said, okay, I went online and I did a will today. Everything is good. Well, he died a year later. Turns out he never signed it. It was never notarized or signed, so it was totally not worthless. And so she got 1/3, and his 2 kids each got 1/3 of everything.
Let me guess.
She was so angry.
Did they let her stay in the house?
I don't remember, but she only owned 1/3 of the house. They owned 2/3 of the house. That's the kind of stuff that can happen if you don't get this stuff done.
Gotta be careful.
Anyways.
All right. Myth number 3, a will is too important for anyone except a lawyer to do. We all have different lives, so there's no one-size-fits-all way to go about making your will. If your assets and family situation are more complex, then making your will online is probably not going to go well for you. If somebody's got any kind of complicated situation, they need a lawyer who specializes in wills, estates, and trusts, not a will program like we're talking about. If you have a blended family, if you own your own business, or if you have a lot of assets, or if you're worried that at the time of your death things would be contentious among your kids or whoever your heirs might be, you hire a lawyer to do your will.
I agree with that.
Yes, me too. It's going to be more expensive than we're talking about with these things, but well worth it. For everyone else, online will-making services can be very effective. These tools ask the right questions to guide you through the will completion process. And if you're still unsure after trying one, you can always take your self-prepared will to a lawyer for him to review, him or her. It's much cheaper to have a lawyer review what you've prepared than it is to have them work on your will from scratch.
You know, the last myth is a will is too expensive and takes too much time. Well, hopefully we've already busted this myth for you. As you can see from our list of 6 companies to consider when you're self-preparing your will, it doesn't have to cost you much time or money to get your estate in order. There are lots of free or relatively inexpensive options to get started. An electronic will making service have simplified the process for you, so you can finish this in less than 30 minutes, probably.
This is pretty cool. It's actually pretty cool. Final thoughts. For many people, the idea of a will is daunting, but it doesn't have to be expensive, costly, painful. It doesn't have to be any of that stuff. You can use an online will making service that in the end will only cost you a few minutes. Or if you want a bit more support and extra documents, you can pay more for additional benefits from many of the companies that we've talked about. Just be cautious about what benefits the extra money covers and read the fine print always. For example, let's say you want to pay more for access to an attorney. In this case, find out how much access you get to the attorney and what type of attorney you will work with. Also, find out if you're signing up for a subscription before you get hit with a surprise charge.
So I wanted to make a note here. I tell all of my clients, instead of paying a lawyer to do your power of attorney and advance directive, you can go to Emory Law, and it's free. So you go to just search Emory Law Free POA, and you will go right to the website, and it will have fillable forms for a power of attorney advance directive. Now, the power of attorney has to be notarized, but you can do with your financial advisor or at your bank. The advance directive does not. And the advance directive to me is extremely important because, and I hand it out to my clients all the time, because this is where you say, here's what I want to have happen. If I'm going to be on life support, or if I'm dying or whatever, what treatment do I want? And I'll tell you, we watched my dad go through this. He had a UTI. He ended up in the hospital. His organs were shutting down, and the doctors came in every day and said, let's give you an IV. Let's give you this. We're going to do that. And he's like, no, my brother was there with his advance directive saying, I do not want any treatment. I am ready to die. But they kept coming in, wanting to treat him. And this is what you're dealing with. You've got to get this stuff done because you don't want somebody being treated when they should be just letting to die. I don't understand. I had a client last year. Their father was in a facility for 6 months. They said he was going to last 2 weeks. And guess what? They put in a feeding tube and an IV. And so he lasted 6 months, and he was laying in a bed unconscious in a diaper. And totally not there. But they kept him alive.
Against his will.
Yeah.
Against his wishes.
I don't understand. So please pay attention to this stuff. And email us if you want any of this article, or if you want the Emory Law website or whatever. You can email Randy at rfmoney.com or Sherry at rfmoney.com or Jonathan either. So any of us can help you with this. But I just really need you to get this done.
All right.
Please.
Moving on, let's talk about inflation. Inflation is down to roughly 3%. Why isn't that good enough? Inflation finished 2024 at roughly 3%. While that is a vast improvement over the 9+% peak we hit in the June of 2022, using the Federal Reserve's preferred gauge, we are not that far from the central bank's 2% target and well below the 2022 high. The difference between 2 and 3% may not seem large, yet it could matter quite a lot. That's because of how much harm inflation causes on mass psychology. People aggrieved by sticker shock are more likely to press for a bigger raise, which might push employers to raise prices further. Shoppers speed up their purchases to get ahead of price increases, which further lift prices. That logic backed former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan's belief that the price stability is achieved when inflation doesn't affect how people behave. A bevy of research has shown that anxiety about inflation spikes once it passes the 4% threshold in a year. And that research came from a former Treasury official, Tara Sinclair. She believes that the Fed definitely needs to get back inflation back to 2% to soothe the rage, especially given that the bank has put its name behind that target percentage. Is 3% the same as 2% when we're coming back down from above? It's pretty clear that it's not. From the Fed's credibility standpoint, they really need to stick the landing, according to Sinclair.
So that might take a while. In December, the Fed projected it will get inflation only part of the way back to 2% by the end of 2025. Last month, New York Fed President John Williams said he expects inflation to fall to 2% in the coming years. Yes, you heard that right. Years. So much for transitory, right? We know the Fed is not going to lower rates as fast as Trump would want. It poses a particular challenge to Trump because some of his policies, such as tariffs, could slow or even halt the descent of inflation. The Peterson Institute for International Economics has projected that 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico and a 10% tariff on China could boost U.S. inflation by about half a percentage point in 2025 and by a quarter point in 2026. So, as a side note, I have clients that believe that inflation is going to go up by 25%. What they're hearing on the news is that inflation is going to be extreme. But what this article is saying, you're talking about these tariffs and that you would have a half percentage point of increase. So if you're freaking out about the big numbers, realize that's not the reality.
Right.
I've had clients bring this up this week. So anyways, that is close to the policy Trump announced Saturday that his plan applies a lower tariff to Canadian energy imports.
Right. And last week, he also threatened tariffs on products such as oil and gas, computer chips, and pharmaceuticals from other countries as soon as mid-February. And the University of Michigan's latest monthly survey, the median expectation of consumers is for a 3.3% inflation this year, up from the 2.8 expected in December. Tariffs are the prime source of anxiety. Anticipating the public's reaction is tricky, not least because economists still argue about why people hate inflation so much in the first place. In textbook models and in many real-world instances, including during the 2020s, wages tend to catch up to prices, so inflation doesn't, over time, erode the purchasing power of the average worker's paychecks.
Even so, inflation makes people feel that they are falling behind, even if they get a pay raise due to the inflation. People dislike inflation for a simple reason. They think it erodes their living standard. For some workers, this is true. While wages on average may stay ahead of inflation, some people's don't, or wages may take months or years to catch up. Yet researchers find that even those who do get raises resent rising prices for eroding a hard-earned higher salary. I hate going to the store and looking at the price of eggs when I understand that it's because of bird flu and all that. I still don't like paying $2 extra,
Right.
even though I can afford it. It's just it's just a logical thing in your brain. So they'll blame inflation on the government, but when you ask them why their wages are rising, they'll ascribe it to themselves. Anyways,
Other researchers are peering deeper into the consumer psyche. Backed by fresh surveys, economist Joe Guerrero of the University of California suggests people really hate inflation because getting a matching raise at work doesn't happen automatically. This is what Sherry was talking about. Instead, workers often have to ask for it. Or maybe it doesn't happen at all, which I think is what she was talking about. Some workers' wages don't catch up. That means steeling yourself for a negotiation, risking the boss's ire, and sometimes going to the trouble of getting a competing job offer from another company. Union workers might have to go on strike, which is very stressful. Guerrero and his co-authors think that these hurdles are what inflation haters really despise, so much that many would rather take a small pay cut than do something about it.
if they are right, 2025 might not feel much better for consumers. Although inflation has cooled substantially, so has the labor market. There are now about half as many job openings per labor seeker as during early 2022. It is taking more workers months, not weeks, to secure another offer for negotiating leverage. Fewer managers will be feeling generous. When the labor market is hotter, the employer may even try to prevent you from leaving with a preemptive wage increase. So I had clients in this week. This was fascinating. And she works for a company, and they've just rolled out a program where if you agree to work for the company for 10 years, you get an extra amount of money plussed up in your 401k. That if you agree to work 10 years and you contribute to your 401k, they contribute a bigger match if you've committed to the 10-year thing. I've never heard of this before, but it's about retention because it's a big problem. I thought it was fascinating.
It is, for sure.
Yep.
All right, Randy, we got time for this one, right?
Yeah, you may have to
Shorten it a little bit.
shorten it a little. You got a minute and a half.
All right, planning a trip this summer? If so, listen up. There's a change in the acceptable identification that TSA checkpoints are accepting. Adult passengers 18 and older must show valid identification at the airport checkpoint in order to travel. Normally, this would be a driver's license or other state photo identity, like passports, etc. Beginning May 7th of this year, if you plan to use your state-issued ID or license to fly within the U.S., make sure it is a Real ID compliant. REAL ID compliant. If you're not sure if your ID complies with Real ID, check your State Department of Motor Vehicles. The Real ID Act of 2005 established minimum security standards for license issuance and production. These standards provide an additional level of security to protect your identity. It also prohibits federal agencies from accepting driver's licenses and ID cards from states that do not meet the Act's minimum standards. will not only be for boarding flights. Also, beginning May 7th, everyone must have a real ID license or passport to enter certain federal buildings, military bases, and nuclear power plants. TSA does not require children under 18 to provide identification when traveling within the United States. Contact the airline for questions regarding specific ID.
Yeah, and if you arrive at the airport and you don't have the acceptable identification, you may still be allowed to fly, but you're going to have to stand there with a TSA officer and fill out a bunch of paperwork. So if you don't have the new ID card by the prescribed date in May, then you're going to want to get there at least 3 hours before your plane departs. And we're at the end of our show, and we appreciate everyone for tuning in. Hope you have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Your Money, produced by Lifespan Wealth Management. As financial advisors, the main thing we do is provide retirement planning advice and manage our clients' investment accounts. If you're looking for an investment advisor, call our office at 478-922-8100 to set up your complimentary consultation. You can learn more about our services by visiting our website at retirerelax.com.
And if you'd like to contribute to the show, you can email me, randy@rfmoney.com, with a question or a topic that you would like for us to cover in a future broadcast. And we look forward to connecting with you next week. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Osaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Osaic Wealth.